So, what is spiral dynamics? It is a model that describes the development of individuals, organizations, and societies. To put it more simply, spiral dynamics is a way to understand how people think under different circumstances. In the middle of the 20th century, psychologist Dr. Clare Graves became the originator of a theory to explain humanity's path from where it was to where it is and to where it will be going potentially. Um, I'll go ahead and read the beginning part over again. Basically, spiral dynamics is a way to understand how people think under different sets of circumstances. Dr. Clare Graves was the originator of the idea. And over time, Graves' ideas have been added to by a number of individuals. This happened back in the 50s, 60s. And three of the key ones were Don Beck, Christopher Cowan, and Ken Wilber. And it's still mainly talked about as spiral dynamics. Another name for it is integral theory. Does anybody have any familiarity with either of those terms?
Oh gosh, yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. I thought I was going to be able to say what I wanted. I wouldn't have to call me out, but now I know. I
That looks like a sine wave.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind. Think of it kind of like a spring almost. My art isn't great, but sort of a revolving, coming to the next one, bouncing back and forth, not just in a straight line, but that's kind of the idea of what I drew up here. So I learned of this about 10 years ago when I was in a training for a job, and it's been just so valuable in the way I have interactions with people, the way I see church function, the way I see any organization. It's just been a huge blessing, and I've talked about it with a number of times with David over the past few months, and he thought it'd be a good idea to add it to the class. So that's why it's happening here. This model has had a global impact over its short lifespan. For example, while Nelson Mandela was imprisoned during apartheid in South Africa, he came across spiral dynamics in some of the things he was reading and was inspired by its potential. Later, during the transition of power post-apartheid, Mandela sought out Don Beck, who sort of took on the mantle of spiral dynamics after Graves, and invited him to come to South Africa dozens of times as they were creating this new government. And Don Beck was helpful in sort of helping Mandela think through how he would try to join this country that was completely at odds with itself. The question that Mandela wanted to try to answer was, how does a country that consists of individual factions, often polarized into entrenched camps, avoid splitting violently into pieces? Can divisive issues of race, ethnicity, and nationalism ever be relaxed into collaboration? Which I think is, that seems compelling to us today. How can we get along better when people seem to have very different goals, ways of seeing the world? So why are we talking about this in a Bible class? Genesis 1 tells us that mankind was created in the image of God. And I believe that if we're going to be a blessing to those we encounter in the world and be faithful to our calling, we must see each child as God sees them, or at least attempt to do that. So just kind of thinking, I think of upcoming events. I think there's going to be Thanksgiving coming, there's going to be Christmas coming. I can already see who's going to be pictured around the room, who's going to be at the table. I know who's going to say something that might be inflammatory to me. And I'm something that's so valuable. I can't speak this, but understanding where people are coming from and the heart behind it. There's good behind the words, even when sometimes they cut to you, or something you can't understand. There's something that's being said that I don't even know. That's out of left field. That doesn't make any sense to me. Some of the different places people are coming from and the motivations behind them. That's been a healthy part of this, helping to see people better. And the world tells us that in all settings, if you hear something that is not coming from your perspective, it's either wrong or bad or misguided, or it's set out to, it's a them that's seeking to do the us harm. And so this is hopefully going to kind of at least help understand some of that a little better.
When I was thinking of integral theory a while ago, I was thinking of calculus.
Okay, there's no math here. There's no math, so don't worry.
You got all the math guys in here.
With all the sine wave.
Yeah, no, there's no math, no test on this. Don't worry about that. So I'm going to cover a few things before we get started into the colors. So as you look at this, you'll see. I'll make sure I get my paper with me. So there's kind of a transitions that occur over life, and I'll get into what each of them mean. But essentially, when there's one color, see here, brown, that's where somebody's center of gravity is. As they're introduced to a new perspective, maybe they become aware that there's a limitation in their previous center of gravity, the color. This is the introduction of a new idea prior to it becoming your new center of gravity. So you've got a beige center of gravity. There's a awareness of a limitation in that beige center of gravity, which introduces you to a new worldview, and then becomes a new center of gravity. So over time, you become aware of a limitation. There's an introduction to a new way to see the world. And then as you go on, you get introduced to a new center of gravity, new center of gravity. So, that's kind of an overview of why kind of the colors leak into each other. So as you move along, you don't leave the previous ones behind. As you move, you transcend one of the centers of gravity, but you also include it. Think of it like you add another tool to your options, another way to, when you interact with a set of circumstances, it gives you a second way to act. You don't just leave them behind, they're always with you, and you can, and this will make more sense as I go through it, but you never lose something that you've previously had. You move to a new one, and you also have that as well. And then also, as they're bouncing back and forth, it's going from much more of an individualistic, how do I get what I want, to more of a communal, these are sort of warmer colors. We didn't have a yellow in our colors, so this is yellowish, but just think of that as yellow. But these are some of the warmer colors that are more of a personal drive kind of mentality. And then the cooler colors, which are much more of a communal, how can we as a group of people function together. And as you go along, it becomes more complex. This also pertains to societies, organizations. BAML is somewhere on this. But we've got 4 weeks. I've taught this over 8 to 10 to 12 hours in the past. I've got about 4 classes of 45 minutes. So this is going to be very much basic 100 level understanding. And I would encourage, there's so much out there on this. So you can find, if you become interested in this, I'm free to have all the conversations you want to have about this, but also you can go on and learn more, and there's plenty more. This is kind of a taste of it. And this is the most important thing I want to get into before we get started. As people move, there is no worldview that is better than another. A good way to describe this is, think of like a set of generations of a family. Think of the great-grandfather was a farmer. Think of the grandfather was a factory worker. The father was a lawyer, and the son or daughter at the end is a artist. You can't say that a farmer is better than a lawyer or a factory worker is better than an artist. Each of them found themselves under a set of circumstances, and they are doing what works where they are at. Ask a farmer to write a poem. It may not be great. Ask a factory worker to go into a courtroom and prove a case. It's not going to go well, and vice versa. The artist is not going to plow a perfect field. People are where they are, and they have the gifts for that set of circumstances. So as we go along, it can be easy to think of, surely progressing to another way is better than, but not necessarily. People are where they are, and that's where they need to be. There's no reason to try and rush someone to somewhere they're not wanting to go. Where they are is right for who they are and where they're at. So that's very important. And the last one is, if there's anything that, as I'm going through this, if you have any questions, I want you to ask them, because I don't want there to be, somebody else might have the same question. So, fire them at me, and I'll try my best. Yes.
Is there a book that you're?
There is a bunch of books. I'll bring one with me. I've got one at home that I love that is actually from a church leadership perspective. How do you have a good, solid community when you've got people that want different things, and the church has its own set of goals and ideas, and how can you function together? I know that there's each one of these people have written different books on it. Beck, Cowan, Wilbur, Graves has books. Yes, there is as much as you want to dig into this, you can find information. I would probably recommend Don Beck's because that's going to be the most similar to what I'm looking at, what I'm kind of talking us through. But yes, there's plenty of that. Any other questions before I kick us off?
I was texted a question by
Oh,
someone.
great.
They asked, can he provide a practical example of center of gravity change?
Yes. As I go along, it'll become more clear, but think of it like this. The first one is where we all begin at our birth. We enter into the Beige worldview, and I'll get into this in a second. But as you grow and develop and you become aware, I have a family, I have a people group that I'm a part of. I don't just need for myself. I now have this group that I trust, and we're working through this together. So the awareness that it's not just you, the individual, seeking nourishment, seeking warmth. There's a changed center of gravity that we as a collective are seeking safety together. We're seeking health together as a group rather than just myself. And we're not going to get past purple, and hopefully I get there. But yeah, so we're just going to be focusing here today. As we go, we'll keep including, and the complexity will grow. But yeah, so we're going to start out with the Beige worldview. Another term for this is archaic. And I'll keep trying. This is so as up on this board, I'm gonna kind of have some different facts or more details over here. The top one is the percent of the adult population, and this is worldwide. Obviously estimates, but that's gonna give you an idea of, as you interact with the world, this is how many of this type there are approximately. So for Beige, this is only 0.1%. So a very, very small number find themselves with Beige as the center of gravity. Like I said, we all start at this base level of existence. Every infant is born into Beige. The processing is I need warmth, I need food, I need shelter, I need safety. An infant doesn't think about the deep questions about its own existence. It simply responds to stimulus. The compelling drive for Beige is physical survival. The worldview, the world is uncertain, threatening my existence at any moment. Life is a state of nature. This gives us our drive to preserve the self, our ability to shake any allegiance that stands in the way of survival. The strengths of Beige provides a tremendous resilience in the face of life-threatening circumstances. It maintains an unswerving focus to find life's essentials. And it promotes self-reliance. There's nobody else that you're thinking of at Beige, only the self. It's our center of gravity for only a number of months in our life, but remember, as we move to new worldviews, the tools that we learned in Beige transcend, but we transcend this perspective, but we include it along the way. So think of the most intelligent person you know, the person in your life that you just think has it all together, never wavers, is steadfast. There's also an archaic space in that person. If you're in a public setting and gunshots ring out, your mind goes entirely to, how do I survive this? You need to find safety immediately. Or if you're at work and all of a sudden somebody comes to you and says, the company's going under, we have no money to send you out the door with. It's like, this is the last day. I'm sorry. You immediately go to, how am I going to feed myself? How am I going to feed my family? This is alarm. This is top alarm where you go. And so here under this is going to be biblical or religious examples, and then TV movie examples, so that as we're kind of talking about the different colors bouncing off each other, this might be somebody or some kind of a way of thinking that will kind of zero in on what this is. Some people say that if you have an awareness of God in the moment, it can't be beige. I would say that if you are on your own, if it's just you against the world, you're in a beige perspective. So the one that I came up with, and I want to encourage if there's any one that kind of stands out as we go through, to shout them out. But I thought of when David is fleeing Saul and he's in the wilderness and he's got himself, and so that's kind of a biblical example. If there's a group that's trying to take care of themselves as a team, that would be beyond this. So this is the individual. So
What about Joseph?
yeah, Joseph, certainly, when he's in the well. And that's, I'll just put Saul here. And then the movie that I thought of, this is the first one that came to mind, was Tom Hanks in Castaway. When he's on that island by himself. This is probably as good of an example of a person in.
No.
So any other?
So
Yeah.
would it be beige though if our initial reaction when we're faced with temptation, spiritual temptation, is I got to go to God versus relying on ourselves? Would that be considered beige? I know I'm splitting.
See, here's what I'll say: is that this is theory. So you I guess you could be wrong, but if in your mindset, if you're working something out, like this isn't like we could bounce ideas off each other. So I would say, yeah, absolutely. If you feel like you're in a place where you've got, you're at the ground zero based on anything, that could be, yeah, I would think so.
When you say ground zero, I was meaning that from a positive perspective.
Okay.
Not,
Okay.
You're at the bottom of, but I'm faced with the
Okay.
temptation.
Yeah.
But my immediate reaction is, all right, God, what do you want me to do? Is that because I'm relying on somebody else is where my mindset.
Okay, from that perspective, that probably gets further
To a
into
different
it.
color.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this is when
This is like,
fight or flight.
yeah, there you go. Okay.
I have a question about that
Yeah.
though. Food,
Mhm.
shelter,
Mhm.
clothing,
Yes.
obviously physical needs.
Mhm.
Why would God not be a fundamental need?
I think that is think of the infant. Think of an infant who is to think of God in that moment. I think is to draw in more perspective than that place has. If you're bouncing back, I mean, you're not going to totally lose everything, but it's going to be your instinctual reaction.
Atheists live and survive without God.
Infants don't know about God, so all they know about is food, warmth, and
Right. Yeah.
you're saying once we get into the purple and we learn about God, that's
Well, it's yeah. I mean, a lot of the religious mentality kind of happens more in the cool colors. I mean, individuals who are more inclined to go to God in these moments, if there might be some go between on that.
Well, I would think that maybe what shifts is the way you're approaching God,
Yeah.
right? So maybe if I'm in a beige space, it's I need help right now. It's like, God, come and rescue me.
Yeah.
Whereas that may not be the relationship I have with God later. If I have a different center of gravity, I may be approaching God differently.
You're
Or
gonna have
expecting
a
something
different perspective of God, certainly.
Well, at this point in beige,
Mhm.
then you would be sort of like an animal.
Yeah.
They live off of pure instinct. They don't know how, they're not going to God's,
Yeah.
anything like that. So at that stage in beige, it's not God there yet.
Yeah, I mean
So,
that is a good way to think of it. Is what is there's some people would describe it sort of as an animalistic reaction
Right.
to a set of circumstances. Yeah.
This seems to trend with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I just see the pyramid shifted on its side,
Mhm.
where you can't think about what you need from a spiritual standpoint if you are so hungry you can't think straight. Your hypoglycemia kicks in, and you know, none of that registers if you don't have the physical needs met.
Yeah, the base, you gotta
And
get
again, if
growth
you
from
haven't
there.
gotten to that point yet in your,
Yeah.
and I think there's, going to be some back and forth, but that's what it makes me think of, is just that thing tipped on that side.
A lot of these you also see if you were just to search an image, a lot of it does go up and down. I've got a board that forces me this way, but yeah, that's a good way to think about it. So any other ideas of a good TV or movie example that?
Hatchet.
Hmm?
Hatchet.
How to?
The book.
Okay.
Hatchet.
Hatchet. Yeah, you're right. That makes more sense than how to, because I don't know what how to is. I'm trusting you
I like
all.
that you wrote it anyway.
Yeah, I thought it was a good idea. All right, so any other thoughts before we move into purple? We're doing good on time, so. All right, so purple, and another terminology to think about this is magic. About the time a child begins putting words into statements, purple starts rivaling beige for dominance. Let me know if I'm in your way over here. When purple becomes the center of gravity, safety replaces survival as the driving impulse. A one-year-old child knows who is in their tribe. That child also becomes aware of a world where almost anything is possible. So let's switch back to thousands of years ago, when the archaic person realizes their survival is dependent on sun and rain to grow plants needed to survive. These come from the sky. We need those natural forces on our side, and you can see why many early cultures had a sun god or had a rain god. We need to keep the spirits happy. If there's a drought, we must have done something to anger whatever or whoever gives us rain. Maybe we should give a portion of our next harvest to that God so they will continue to provide for us. We acknowledge where things come from. There's an outside force that determines if I survive. It's up to those forces. Purple is disempowered in a way that beige never perceived themselves to be. And think of kind of the tribal grouping. The most valued member of a purple society is the spiritual guide. The one who can go beyond what we can see and understands how to reach the forces of good and evil. This is about 10% of the population globally. The compelling drive is safety with or from the unseen. So I'm going to try and fit this on here. The world is ruled by, this is the kind of the worldview. The world is ruled by unseen forces of good and evil that control our well-being. Life is mysterious, but it's also frightening. This gives us our sense of tribe, captured in the sense that these are my people. They will always be here for me. We are one blood, one spirit. This place and these people are home. It gives us our ability to blur the perceptual boundary between fantasy and what is real. And it also gives us our sense of shame for violating taboos. The strengths of this worldview takes spiritual realities seriously. It builds deep, lasting ties between people. It promotes a rich imagination. It fosters close connectedness with nature. It gives us the world of collaboration, and provides us with the capability to suspend reality. Weaknesses to the worldview. You can be gullible to deception by those it trusts. If you trust someone, you can be led astray by them fairly easily. You are unable to adjust quickly to new realities. And you're suspicious of outsiders and outside influence, which is a weakness, but there's some strength in that as well. So now, there's no church that is a beige church. You're on your own. So there are purple examples of spirituality, certainly. And in the church, you see God as a protective presence for those who honor his ways. And if you were a purple center of gravity in any church, you would press for a church with a feel of a close-knit tribe. You would press for sermons that reinforce the group's heritage. Who are we as a people? You would seek out worship that is strong on tradition and follows set patterns. And you would desire leaders who are protective patriarchs over the group. So that I've talked about the infant perspective and why purple is the next step there. I've also talked about the archaic transition to how do we get our nourishment? It's coming from these forces that I don't understand. So what does purple look like in present day Texas? Because all those concepts seem foreign. Think about our holiday traditions. Think about what you did in your family growing up, the things that you were taught along the way. Those things that made our family us. The things you do around the Thanksgiving table. Maybe you, tell the things you're thankful for. Also at ritualistic prayers, we pray before meals, we pray at bedtime. These are the cycles that make us who we are. And this is huge in sports fandom. Maybe you have a lucky shirt you always wear to the game. Maybe they've got to win this game to get to the playoffs. You're going to wear this shirt because for some reason, the unseen forces will give your team this win if you just go this way. Or sports superstitions. I can think of, I'm a Rangers fan, so, it hasn't been good lately. But I can remember back when they were trying, they were in the World Series back 2010 and 2012. I was watching the games with some friends, and one of my friends stood in one spot as long as things were going well, and then as soon as the guy got on base, he would move to a different spot, and he was strategically putting himself around the room because he thought, I don't know if he actually thought this, but he was having fun with it, and he eventually got in the wrong spot because we lost. But this idea that somehow I can influence what's going to happen by things that are unattainable or unknown. I'm going to need you all to help me with this one. The stars and stripes are big and bright. That's right. That's who we are as Texans. This is who we are. Ritualistic prayers, like I said. Anything that reminds your intimate tribe of who you are. This is something when you've got an infant child, this is the day-to-day activities. This is, you're a Packer. You do things this way. Any of that mentality of the small family, close-knit tribe, which doesn't happen as well in our day and age because we are, our tribes are kind of our family. A long time ago, you would have been with all of your whole family, and there would have been a greater sense of this community. So what about at BAML? What might this look like in a church setting? And I'll put some examples up there in a little bit, but I know I've kind of talked about this in a very ancient way, but at church, this is in the water of what we do at BAML.
I know not all churches do communion every Sunday that we do, so I think that's
Absolutely. Communion is a great example of purple action that reminds us who we are and what we're about.
Baptism by immersion.
Mm-hmm.
Sir.
Absolutely. Those are the three I had marked down. Prayer. Anytime the concept of prayer is very much the purple. Communion, baptism. Let's see. I put down the Exodus story. Moses is this conduit to God who is
putting these forces down on Egypt. Abram from, let's see how much time we have. Yeah, we got time for this. Can somebody read Genesis 12, 1 through 8? Genesis 12, 1 through 8.
Definitely makes you think of the Israelites,
Yep.
you know, this whole.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
The Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out for Haran. And he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there, he went on toward the hill was east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord.
Yeah, so Abraham is the spiritual guide. Imagine you're not Abram, you're one of the other people in his flock, and he's saying, all right, we're leaving. I had a conversation with God who told me to do this. And at that moment, you're just like, all right, let's go. You are the one who's clearly in the know, and I trust you. And then the altar would have been an example of this ritualistic moment that they all. But yeah, and the Israelites up until really the judges, whenever the leader is a religious figure who is guiding, that would be kind of a good example of where the purple was the center of gravity at that time. The Ark of the Covenant. There's this thing we're bringing along. When it's with us in battle, we win. It is reaching to God. The Lord's Supper, like I said, is another example. All right. And so movies, TV examples. I mean, really, I'm just going to put Disney up here because that is in every one of the, well, I won't say every one of those stories, but in many of those stories, there's this mythical concept to it. There's something going on. Cinderella, there's so much going on in that story. But in a lot of them, Beauty and the Beast, there's this rose that somehow is going to determine whether or not this former human, is still a human or is now this beast for the rest of his life. I mean, you name it, we could probably. There's certainly going to be some element of purple in each of those stories to draw the kids in. And I don't know, there's a really good example that would kind of. How many of you can think of the movie Apocalypto? It came out maybe 15 years ago. Yeah. That's very much that's a period piece with Native Americans, kind of their some of the struggles of their time. So I'll just put that one up here. If you haven't seen it, it's got.
I know we're talking about this in the context of church, but when you started the purple part and we're listing the characteristics, my husband watches a lot of documentaries and I immediately thought cult. So, and I think there's a church stuff could shift in that direction if not led well.
Right.
And I know there's probably a lot of people in the world who look at religion as cult. But anyway, I just thought that was it. And when you said Disney, I thought cult immediately.
Yeah, and that's where some of the weakness of the purple is. If your spiritual guide is leading you astray, whether on purpose or not, there could be a group that goes and can go wherever, because as long as I trust this person to lead me well, you're going to go where they take you. So yeah, there's potential for, but at the same time, it's a close knit community that they work together. This is when you're in a purple setting, think of when you go back home for Christmas and you have those moments that just make you feel like you're a kid again or whatever. It's a very wonderful experience that we draw from regularly.
Thought of an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Remember The Village?
Yeah, that's a great one.
That was in a negative way that this power can be used.
Absolutely. So we got about 5 minutes. I guess any questions? Anything we've covered today? We'll keep building as we go. I think I'm going to take on the next 2 next week, and then maybe the next 2, and then I'll kind of wrap it up. And one of the neat things about this as we go is, we're talking about 10% of the population at this point. So the meat of it is going to come right in here. And as different worldviews come together and are interacting, that's conflict. Conflict can easily be described through a lot of what we'll talk about. One of the beauty of this is, go ahead.
How do you deal with the person that's on a different level than you are?
I think you have to, for me, what's been a blessing to me is I see the good of what you're trying to achieve, the strengths of where the person is. It doesn't always come across well, which we've all seen regularly. All you got to do is turn on the news, you see how conflict is not handled well. But I think seeing the core of the individual as someone who is trying to achieve something good, and not just trying to see people as what they are negatively bringing in the situation. How this is trying to see the good behind the person rather than just what the world tells us is at the core of what they're doing.
According to the theory, would the end be turquoise be ideal?
That's sort of the integral is kind of where that goes. You're once again, if you're thinking of a bell curve, there's very little on this end, and some of this is theoretical still. So we're not going to spend a ton of time over here because it's in a time period like this, it's really tough to go too far there.
But in the theory, doesn't it say that there's no better thing?
Right.
Like you were saying at the beginning.
Yeah.
We flow in and out of these different worldviews. They all have their own value where they're at.
Yeah.
And to society as a whole.
Absolutely.
So.
But there is a focus for the class that we want to go somewhere with it.
Honestly, no. The goal of the class is to appreciate where people are coming from and where they are. You could try all day to try and get people to jump over, but if somebody's not wanting to go there, you're harming. Everybody's being harmed in the process. You're feeling like you didn't do what but at the same time, I think of parenting. You're trying to grow your children, so it's appreciating where they are, and the way I like to think of it is being someone who can journey with someone as they're moving along. As soon as you cut off a relationship with someone, you're not doing either of you any good. Not that some relations don't necessarily need to be cut off, but when there's that close nature relationship, if there isn't the trust to journey together, then you're not going to help each other.
I can envision looking up the spring at someone at one of the higher levels, like they're the sage that you think about, oh, you've seen this in such a perspective, and then looking back, you might say, oh, you're so grounded in this simplistic, very straightforward approach, so you could see good in both directions from where you are.
That's a healthy way to do it. That's a very healthy way to look at it. What you commonly find is that, and this is something I'll get into more, but typically people will look at people in this direction from a fearful standpoint, but people typically, and I'm talking more adults, people don't really look at children for acting like children, but people commonly look this way at others from disdain. So why are you where you are, as opposed to, it's the same question. Why are you where you are? What are you doing where you're at? That's the common. So let's grow towards what Jeff said.
I'm already doing what you're talking about. Because if we met that 0.1% in Beige, I don't think any of us are like, hey, you're doing awesome where you're at.
Exactly.
As adults.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a good place to cutoff. Any other questions? We got very little time. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pray and we'll get out here. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the chance to join together here and learn more about you, worship you, and learn how to go out in the world better than when we came in. And just help us as we journey through this study to appreciate others better, to not hold people at arm's length, but to draw them in and try to develop relationships along the way. Thank you that you are over us all, that you see us all as made in your image, and help us to strive for that as well. We love you, and just help us this week. In your name I pray. Amen.